Welcome to Voices of the Community, which explores critical issues facing Northern California communities. We introduce you to the voices of community thought leaders and change makers who are working on solutions that face our fellow individual community members, neighborhoods, cities, and our region. This is George Koster, your host. Welcome to this one-hour special show. Going into the fall, we'll be producing virtual live panel discussions on a monthly basis for these one-hour special shows. We're bringing together both our past guests and new guests to update our community on their latest efforts to deal with the ongoing and ever-changing COVID-19 pandemic's impact on their operations and survival, as well as how the community can get engaged in supporting their work. Hi, everybody. It's George Koster from Voices of the Community. Thank you so much for joining us on our first attempt to do a live virtual panel discussion. And we hope that this works as we continue to go forward into the month of September through December. We're going to do these as monthly conversations with some of our favorite nonprofits that we've spoken to over this last 15 months. Our panel discussion today is we have 5 nonprofits from our series on COVID-19's impact on our nonprofits. And we wanted to invite them back to the show to update us on what they're all doing to respond to the new Delta variant outbreak and how they're dealing with the reopening of it and the service to their clients. So I'm going to start off by introducing Amy Proser from Word for Word, and you can find out more about Word for Word in our episode 8. So Amy, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Great. Thanks, George. My name is Amy Prosser, and I'm with Word for Word Performing Arts Company. I run Word for Word's educational program, which is called Youth Arts, and we help Bay Area students develop literacy skills by helping them transform poetry and fiction into live performances using the Word for Word style of theater. And we work with students in Oakland, San Francisco, Marin, and we work with the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria up in Sonoma County.
And our next guest is Meghan Freebeck. And Meghan is a longtime friend of the show. She goes back to when she was the executive director of Project Homeless Connect. And we've done several series on Project Homeless Connect, which you can find on our site. And she started Simply the Basics. So for more information about Simply the Basics background, go to episode 16. So Meghan, tell the audience a little bit more about Simply the Basics.
Thanks, George. So Simply the Basics has a mission to improve the health and wellness of the community, allowing people to focus on greater goals. We really believe a lot in Maslow's hierarchy of needs that if you can't meet your most basic human needs, you really can't focus on other goals in your life like employment, mental health, or something as important as your relationships. So we really come in at the bottom of that pyramid to help meet those basics. We are the first nationally reaching hygiene bank, operating a lot like a food bank, but focused on hygiene care, basic needs, anything that can really improve physical health and wellness, reduce infections, reduce the spread of a virus, and just feel like the best versions of ourselves. So we distribute hygiene to the low-income community, to schools where children don't have access, families who most recently lost their employment, as well as people experiencing homelessness. We do this directly, as well as with partnerships of over 190 service providers throughout the country. So pretty prolific. I'm really excited to be here to chat about that again.
Sounds like it's expanded since our last conversation. It's great. Our next guest is Risa Schwartz. She's a board member from the Children's Book Project and their amazing work of giving away, over 3 million books now, Risa, since the last we talked?
Yeah. So my name is Risa, CEO of the Children's Book Project. With my left hand as a volunteer and with my right hand in real life, I'm an attorney and knowledge management consultant. The Children's Book Project is a 29-year-old nonprofit that gives books to children and families that need books to keep. The books are always for free, and it's to promote equity in literacy and learning and life. And we have a number of programs that do that. We have a book bank where organizations serving under-resourced folks come to us and select the perfect books for their constituency, and they're always for free and to keep. And we have a Read Aloud program where organizations serving young parents with 0 to 5-year-olds come and we discuss best practices because of studies that show the benefit of reading aloud to children is extremely important to success in life. And we have a special income stream to buy books that are perfect for parents, whether they have good literacy or not, to quote unquote read aloud to their children good picture books and in multiple languages as well. And we have several other programs that I'll talk about later, but mostly we survive by book donations and financial donations to keep the books that we give away, over 150,000 a year, all for free, to keep the lights on.
And we have a whole show on Children's Book Project that you can also listen to in episode 6. And our next guest is Kris Kepler from LavaMaeX. And LavaMae is another friend of the show that goes back when Denise first started it. I think our first interview was back in 2015, 2016. So Kris, tell us about LavaMaeX.
Yes. Hi, my name is Kris Kepler. I'm the CEO of LavaMaeX. And LavaMaeX is a nonprofit that teaches and trains people to bring mobile showers and other essential care services to the unhoused in their communities. So our new impact goal is to create a network of providers that launch and sustain programs modeled after ours to serve 100,000 people by 2024 throughout the world. And we still offer direct service for our mobile showers and our pop-up care villages, which brings critical service providers to the streets to serve alongside us, as well as our hand washing stations. So one of the things that's most important to us outside of consulting and the direct service is to teach and train people how to deliver those services with what we call radical hospitality, which is really bringing a extraordinary level of care to the guests that we serve and restoring their dignity, increasing their sense of optimism, ensuring them of their self-worth, and really unlocking the opportunities that come with being clean.
Turning to our other guest, Adriana Marcial of the San Francisco GirlsChorus, which is another wonderful longtime nonprofit here in San Francisco. And you can find out more in episode 30 about all of the amazing programs they transitioned to online. But Adriana, tell us more.
Yes, I'm Adriana Marcial. I'm the Interim Executive Director at the San Francisco GirlsChorus. We have been in San Francisco for over 40 years now, and we focus on choral education for girls and young women ages 4 to 18. It is an after-school program that you go through the full levels from prep chorus through level 4, and then there's the opportunity to work with our premier ensemble, which is really amazing. They perform in normal times all over the Bay Area and the region. They tour. We also have 3 campuses. We have one in Hayes Valley, we have an East Bay location, and one in Bayview, Hunters Point. All of that is how we operate during non-COVID, and it's been an interesting journey to figure out how to deliver choral music during this COVID time.
Well, and since this is the first day of school here in San Francisco Unified School District, back to you, Risa, with regards to books and how the Children's Book Project is dealing with the reopening. Last we had left our conversation, you guys were trying to find a building. So give us a little update and then talk about how the new school year and the new COVID-19 variant is impacting you guys.
Yes, thank you. And by the way, it's marvelous to hear. I feel like George has brought together the pieces of a puzzle of equity with people. Your organizations are approaching it from the arts and from hygiene and literacy. It's just lovely to see these different nonprofits surviving in this very difficult time and doing such great work. So I'm really pleased to be on the panel with you all. When last George and I talked, the San Francisco School District had given us a free space for 6 years in one of their decommissioned schools, and they were tearing it down to build affordable educator housing, which was a great thing. But when the pandemic came, they closed to the public all the schools, and we worked with them and tried to find a new free space or even a for-pay space within the SFUSD, the San Francisco Unified School District. But we were unable to do that. And so we struck out on our own and we raised funds. And I mean, it's been a really terrible time. And yet our donors, financial and book donors, have been incredibly responsive. And so we raised sufficient funds. We searched for a site. We found a bare bones warehouse in the Bayview and leased it and started a slow reopening in January and February. However, during the pandemic, when the decommissioned school that we were still in was closed, on September 17th, we basically pivoted on a dime and went from hundreds of clients coming to us, spending an hour selecting books for their children and families, to us, 2 part-time staff people selecting all the books for the organizations we serve and then delivering them. So in the pandemic, we managed to still deliver 80,000 free books. We partnered with SFUSD, and those children who needed food, who usually got food from the schools during the day, but the schools were closed and they had no Wi-Fi and they had no books to get, we got books into the school packets, our free books delivered to the children. So we worked really, really hard to still get books out to children and families who desperately needed it and couldn't do a Zoom or a virtual meeting like we can because of no Wi-Fi or lack of a quiet space in a home, or as some of the panelists know, lack of a home. We still got books out. Now I invite all of you to come to the new site. We are slowly reopening in a COVID-safe way with limited numbers of people allowed in to select books, and we're thrilled. So we have survived thanks to great responsiveness of our book donors and our financial donors. But we're looking for more because now we have to pay rent for the first time. And so we're looking for support.
And coming to you, Amy, last we left our heroes at Word for Word. We were all trying to figure out how you're going to do live performing arts when you can't get into a performance space. And Word for Word did a wonderful job of pivoting, I think, over to KSFP and then creating radio dramas. You were out teaching, working with Native American communities up in the North Bay. So how has Word for Word and all of your work continued on, especially now with our new Delta variant?
Well, I think I'm here representing 3 entities. I'm representing ZSpace, which is our umbrella organization. And ZSpace is hoping for a fall reopening, but we are very carefully watching the news about Delta. And we are hoping to open with mask mandates and vaccine mandates and seating that is spread out. But we're not sure if we're going to be able to do that. So we haven't announced a season yet. So that's where ZSpace is. We're trying to protect our community first and foremost. Word for Word has pivoted to Wordcast, which is the podcast. It's called Word for Wordcast. And we have done some stories this year with local actors and wonderful sound engineers from people's homes. So we did local author Anita Cabrera's 14th Mission, Greg Saris, who's the chairman of the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria's story Citizen. And we're working on George Saunders' Home right now. So those are available on Spotify or Apple, or you can go to our website, zspace.org/pod. And that's been great. We've been able to keep employing local artists, actors, technicians. And then we also were able to do a virtual tour of Retablos by Octavio Solis, which was a production we did in 2020. We had local artist Cindy Santamaria create this incredible animated version of 3 of the stories. And then the actors who performed it on stage voiced it as a voiceover. And then we took that to middle and high schools all over the Bay Area. And the artists led workshops on writing and acting and drawing in response to the students seeing those 3 videos. So that was really lovely. And then Youth Arts, the program that I lead, we have been running our residencies on Zoom. So we've been in Oakland, San Francisco, and Marin schools. And then we ran our annual summer arts camp for the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria this summer. So that's been really, really successful. It was a huge scaling operation to change from in-person to Zoom, but we did it. And I'll talk later about some of the lessons we learned, which have been really beautiful and touching.
And Adriana, so here we are coming back into school, and I know you've also not only been trying to get back into your building there on Fell Street, but you also have a satellite operation out in the Bayview with the Bayview Opera, which has been one of our guests also on the show in the past. So how are things going these days?
Things are going. Let's see, when we went into shelter in place back in March 2020, we also did the very fast pivot to completely virtual. So as George mentioned, we have the 3 campuses. We have over 100 kids coming through our Canbar campus every day. And to completely have that taken down and stopped was quite jarring. But our artistic staff was incredible, and they moved everything to online, which I know sounds kind of crazy. What does choral music look like when you're on Zoom? And it's different. You don't have the unison aspect that you have with choral music in person, but there are many other things that can still be engaging and learning opportunities for kids. So all of our programming, every single rehearsal was conducted online for the last year. And about halfway through the year, we actually started partnering with Jack Trip Virtual Studios, which is a great technology that came out of Stanford. And that is something that is able to provide that unison singing or that unison sound over Zoom. And so we started using that with our premier ensemble, our touring ensemble, our oldest group. And that was completely game changing because it meant after months and months and months of students being isolated, of being alone, that they could actually have this experience of being together online. And it was just one step closer to being in person again. And I think there were some tears shed during that time when that first rehearsal happened. And so now we're able to offer that to two of our other ensembles. And that's something that we're going to incorporate into our teaching in the fall. And then over the summer, we had our very first in-person engagement. Throughout this time, and I'm sure everybody on this panel has been doing this, reading through the guidelines in great detail as they change every 2 weeks or every day, it feels like, and you make a plan and then it changes, and you make a new plan and it changes. And so one of the things that came up for us is that we knew we wanted to provide an in-person experience this summer, and we wanted to do that for our younger kids. And as soon as it was safe to do that in-person singing, we created a camp that actually went 3 weeks long, every other day in person and every other day virtual. And that seems to be the model that we're going to use going forward, where we're part online, part in person. And the reason for that is to mitigate COVID exposure, but also so that if something like Delta becomes more prevalent or things change for the worse, we can shift very easily back to virtual. And everybody, the students and the faculty, are used to that platform, and we keep practicing it. So as we go into the fall, that's our current plan, is we will have all of our rehearsals conducted half online and half in person. And hopefully as we progress through the year, it will be more and more in person, but if not, we're prepared to go virtual as well. And so far, the kids are, I think, excited for anything that they can get, and particularly excited for in person.
Just a quick question. Are you back in your building? So in person means back into the San Francisco GirlsChorus building.
Yeah, so at all of our campuses will be in person. Our staff is still working remotely. I'm sure others on the panel have experienced this, that the remote work does work well. And so our staff will be 50-50. And then we also, on several floors of our building that we own, we lease it out for office space to other nonprofits, and they've all returned also in this sort of remote capacity. But we do try to focus our rentals on performance groups. And so it's nice to actually have some of that returning to the building, and it feels more activated again. And so we're enjoying that while we can.
Meghan, turning to you, Simply the Basic, you had created it while you were at Project Homeless Connect and then incubated it out, and you were really working on the whole hygiene bank when we spoke last year, especially with thousands of unhoused community members and your whole vision of providing hygiene to people. So can you give us a little update?
Yeah, absolutely. And Simply the Basics actually goes back even further from when I was working at San Francisco Suicide Prevention. It really emerged because we're a crisis center. And so we're taking hundreds of calls a day from people at some of the worst times of their life. And a real strategy with crisis intervention and suicide prevention is, have you taken a walk today? Have you taken a shower today? Have you eaten a meal? Let's think about those basics. And majority of our callers were unlimited income, and financials were a big part of their concern. So it was really hard for me to not have that tool to offer them. So that's where we really started forming this concept of let's make sure people can access those basics and have that meal. And how can we expect someone to get out of a crisis if they can't even wash their feet and feel clean? That's where that came about. We operate a lot like a food bank. We call ourselves a hygiene bank, but we distribute through nonprofit partners, through direct families who receive from us, and then public markets where we go to different sites. We've gone to the pop-up village that Kris has mentioned at LavaMaeX. We're going to the women's building next week on Wednesday for people to come and just get really anything they need. And I think what's so crucial about that is people often tell me like, oh yeah, sometimes I give hygiene to someone I see, which is wonderful. It's like giving a meal to someone you see. But one meal doesn't solve food insecurity. It also doesn't solve nutrition issues. So what we make sure we're doing is we are providing those unique needs. Someone with dentures can't use just any shampoo or any toothpaste. Different hair types do need different types of shampoo. So we bring all those types and we make sure that people have choice. That's a really big value of ours, that you can choose what you need, that it actually improves your health. We're not just assuming it does, but it's what you need for yourself. And all of these lessons learned over the last 6 years, we want others to learn from. We have seen 98% of our recipients reported last year an improvement in their physical health. And that's huge because we have thousands of recipients. So we have developed, like you mentioned, a hygiene bank association. And it is basically kind of like Feeding America, the comparison to food banks, or like the food banks of California. It's a system where we can all work together. Hygiene banks, hygiene communities throughout the country are together in a portal. We're launching this quarter, but we've already got 80 groups signed up. We've got a lot of interest, and it's so we can share tools, share resources, promote one another. If you have a need for volunteers in Nebraska, we can help promote that. The Hygiene Bank Association is really exciting. It's also the very first quality control standards for hygiene distribution in the world. We have really clear standards on what food we give to people, but we don't have that for hygiene. And I think it's really crucial that we do that for the dignity and the wellness and the respect of the people we serve. So yeah, the Hygiene Bank Association, it's official enough that it's trademarked and on the website, and we will be going live taking applications next month. So if anyone does work for or with a hygiene bank in your community, definitely reach out and talk to us so we can work together.
And just staying with that, one of the things I found really interesting in our interview last year was when people want to help a nonprofit and they donate a hygiene item, the nonprofit can't really utilize it.
Oh my goodness. The piles of in-kind donations that I'm sure we all get. Yes, you can't throw it away. You gave a tax deduction for it. You have to actually redonate it legally. And that takes time. And so one of our big goals is saving our nonprofit partners time. You can redonate to us and we'll find new homes for it. We'll pick up what you don't need. We've had shelters that are youth shelters, families. We've had shelters that are men's only shelters that call and say, we just got 10,000 tampons and we certainly can't go through 10,000 tampons. And so we try to solve that problem of the waste that comes with improper in-kind donations. And we try to educate the community too. Sometimes it's not always a gift to a nonprofit to give them a bag of your used stuff. Sometimes the greater gift is asking them, what do you really need right now? And maybe sorting on their behalf. So we try to do a lot of that community education, that donor education, because I'm sure I speak for all these nonprofits. Once someone shows up at your door, you just kind of have to say, thank you so much. And then you have a bit of a chore. So asking in advance really helps. Or just reaching out to us and we'll do it for you.
I was just going to say, so you've got that whole bank now, which I thought was a wonderful idea of a giant receptacle, if you will, of a marketplace.
Absolutely.
Kris, turning to you, last we spoke with you and Janice, you were, and for folks who go to our site and look at the interview, you also see one of the videos of Kris. At that time, you were actually doing fresh water because this was like May, June time period of 2020 and fresh water and people being able to clean their hands, etc. So you had started a whole campaign to try to raise awareness and funds around water. And then you were starting to scale the X portion, if you will, of LavaMaeX. So tell us where you guys are today.
Yeah, so I'll just go back to last March during COVID. We had to suspend our direct service work, so our mobile showers and our pop-up care villages. And so one of the things that was really, really important to us at that time, especially for direct service, is to continue to innovate on ways that we could still serve the unhoused community, but not traditionally given our current programs, since we had to really go back and revise protocols and obtain the appropriate PPE gear. So one of the things that we did is, and to Meghan's point, hygiene and hygiene kits, it's so incredibly important for people to receive that. And we looked in our warehouse and saw that we had a bunch of hygiene kit items. And so we assembled those together and actually went to the encampments and delivered them to people on the streets. To our guests, who we missed incredibly, it was so important for us to say, we didn't forget you, we're here for you. And what we found, to your point, George, is that one of the most important things at that time, especially, was access to drinking water. So in relation to the kits, we found that they needed water. We brought clothes, and we also partnered really, really closely with the UCSF street nursing team, who would administer medical care and wound care while we were out in the encampments in San Francisco and in Oakland. So last year we delivered about 8,500 kits. And I would say the biggest thing for guests at that time was feeling very isolated. The libraries closed, McDonald's, Starbucks. So access to things that we have always taken for granted, right? But even for things that are really critical support infrastructure pieces for them were just gone. So really easing their sense of isolation and being there for them and educating them on what services and resources were there for them in their community that was still open. At that time also, while we had suspended our direct service programs, to your point, we saw that there was no access to hand washing stations. And when we did some research, we found that to rent a hand washing station was about like $3,000 a month. So we went back and actually the team created a do-it-yourself hand washing station that you can assemble and deploy. And we still have about 15 deployed in our communities. But we also created a toolkit for other communities to create and deploy in their own communities themselves. And I think probably one of the most interesting stories there is that Red Feather Development Group, which serves the Hopi and Navajo nations, took the toolkit and actually created over 700 hand washing stations to deploy on reservations for families without running water. So a lot of times in a crisis, things can feel a little bit like, what do we do? But it really is a time to innovate and figure out new ways of service while you're figuring out what your current program should look like given the CDC guidelines. And so I would say where we're at today is, as I mentioned, our main goal is to teach and train other providers to bring our programs modeled after ours to their communities. And since the beginning of last year, we have about 22 service providers that have launched, serving just over 14,000 people, more than 30,000 showers. So we're really focused on creating community, and we launched a LavaMaeX Connect platform where people can come from all over the world, sign up, get training online, and really obtain resources, but really work with each other and innovate alongside one another and make connections hyperlocally.
Kris, staying with you, and this is going to be a question for everybody on the panel, is what do you feel has been the biggest impact of LavaMae's work? Obviously, you've been at it here in San Francisco for years, but within this last 18 months now, what do you feel has been the biggest impact?
Yeah, I mean, I would say direct service wise, for us, the biggest impact has just been going out to the streets and staying really consistent and really reassuring people that it's going to be okay, and to connect them with resources, educate them, but then just give them a smile and say, there's a friendly face here. We're here for you. So I think staying consistent and staying engaged has been really important. In some ways, I really feel like with the COVID crisis, there was always a lack of hygiene for the unhoused from the beginning. But in some ways, a silver lining has been that people now realize how important hygiene is, especially in relation to this pandemic. And we're seeing even more service providers that are stepping up and saying, I really want to deliver this in my community. How do I do that? So it's brought almost like this next level of awareness for how important hygiene and sanitation is to everyone, let alone those that are unhoused and don't have access.
And turning to you, Risa, what do you feel has been the biggest impact that Children's Book Project has had on our families and community this last 18 months?
We've read the studies that show that having books in the home is directly related to successful life outcomes, not just in literacy, but in all kinds of fields. And so from a high level, our big success is that we have continued getting books out to children and families who desperately need it. But I'll tell you a very short story. We had a reading interventionist specialist who actually is from pretty far away. We serve over 15 counties, and someone said when they show up with donations or they show up at your door, we never turn anyone away. We have people driving from Manteca and Tracy and Modesto because there's no other project that is giving high quality books away for free. So this reading interventionist drove many hours to get to us and took 440 books for his middle school kids who were reading very far below their age level. And after they had a chance to read some of the books, he had a Zoom meeting. And he told us, and this goes to Adriana's point of weeping when you had the first rehearsal where you could have harmonies together. He told us he's never seen a Zoom meeting like this. The children could not stop talking about the books they were reading, and they were starting to trade them and say, I'll trade you this book because you really should read this. And he'd never seen anything like it. He just sat back. And he told us also that some of these children had lost a mother or a father to COVID-19. And he said one girl during the Zoom meeting said to him, having these books, she had lost her mother. Having these books let her go into another world for a moment. And so at a high level, we know we're doing some good in the world to promote literacy and successful outcomes. And on a very personal level, our big successes, these are children who may never have had books in their own home to own and keep. And that's one of the big misconceptions about the Children's Book Project I've found, is that we're not a lending library. We want children and families, housed or unhoused, to own books. So that, I think, is our biggest success, is that we continued getting it out there during the pandemic. And now this year we're back on track, even with appointments and limited, being very safe with people coming by to get books or have Zoom meetings or read aloud meetings. We're now on track to exceed the number of books we have ever given away in our 29 years. So that's where we are.
Amy, what do you feel has been the biggest impact of the youth program?
I think the biggest impact has been making a safe, fun, loving, warm space where we directly talk about racial and class injustice and the wildfires and COVID. Children have been so stressed, so depressed, so isolated. And I think we have been enormously successful as a team of educators in liking each other and liking the children and helping the children like each other and support each other and have fun and discover art. And I'll say that in our evaluations for our summer camp this summer, over and over again, the students say, my favorite part was the breaks, because during breaks, our teaching artists would ask the students to show their pets or their baby brother or sister or their succulent garden or their fairy garden or the art projects they were working on. And there was all this sharing and laughing and joking. And it was all the community building that I feel so, so proud of this year.
And turning to you, Adriana, what do you feel has been the biggest impact?
The opportunity to be creative. There's so much about COVID that put a stop to things, that shut things down, that isolated people, and kids to not have that opportunity to interact. It's scary. And as Amy was saying, it brings up all kinds of things. And even if our choral teaching, what we were doing was different than what it is in normal times, it was still an opportunity to be creative and to have an outlet to feel and to express. And I think that is so vital and so important. And it also really became about persevering and showing and sharing that no matter what the circumstances are, there's a way to move forward and there's a way to connect and to make something out of the circumstances that we're in. And I think that that's just going to continue, because I think that this COVID obviously is not over and we have a long way to go and circumstances do keep changing. So it's just going to be this continuous learning about how to work together, about how to continue to be creative despite what's thrown at us. So there's just been so many times where I pop into a rehearsal or I hear about something that happened that just makes me feel like, yes, they're creating these beautiful things, and that helps me to keep going too.
Meghan, turning to you, what do you feel has been the biggest impact of Simply the Basics over this last 18 months?
I have been saying for 6 years, hygiene health is public health, and people have not really believed me. It's been our tagline, and I still find I have to convince people of that. I didn't have to convince anyone this year. They really understand that if one of your neighbors is sick, the whole community is at risk. And Simply the Basics was responding well before COVID. There was a Hep A outbreak, and we responded to that in the community. And so to spread a virus with the need for sanitizing and masks and washing your hands and just information and tools we've been doing for quite a while. So I think that what our impact is just really leaning into that robust distribution system we already had. We had the relationship with service providers. We had the system for distributing supplies, picking up supplies, communicating with one another. We've done disaster relief efforts for years. We've done them with fires to hurricanes, earthquakes. We've already been using these tools, and now was our time to really put them all into action together. So dozens of our nonprofit partners shared that if it were not for our COVID-19 response, they would have needed to close their doors for the lack of proper supplies and information and tools. This includes not only shelters and drop-in centers, but even a low-income family daycare that we work with. They don't get public funding, and they serve the low-income community. They serve low-income families. And they shared they would have had to close down, and those parents wouldn't have been able to keep working because their kids couldn't have gone to the daycare then. So our greatest impact really was in just using the knowledge and the tools and the system we already had in place to the best of our ability to reduce the spread of COVID-19, to get information out there, and to really achieve our goal of saving our nonprofits so that they could focus on their missions, keep doing their work, because that's what really became life-saving, is that public health effort we all came together on.
Meghan, staying with you, would you please share with the audience one of your favorite stories?
Yeah, absolutely. This one predates COVID a little bit, but he came back recently. So we have great virtual volunteer opportunities. We recently had a corporate group where there were over 80 people volunteering in different cities, all working for Google. And so we've got a really great system for virtual volunteerism. We had a corporate group recently, and a gentleman, he came up that, I guess it wasn't too recent because it was in person still, but he came up and he kind of said to me, he's like, "Do you want to see me smile?" And I thought that's a little strange, but sure, man, I love to see smiles. Let's see your smile. And he just gave like the biggest grin, and he chomped his teeth down a few times. And I only found out later that he was employed with this company that was volunteering, but he used to be a client of ours. He used to be a recipient of ours, and he has dentures. And he never felt comfortable going to interviews looking for work because he didn't quite have dentures yet. He couldn't work them out. And when you have dentures, you need special toothpaste, you need special glue, you need special tins to soak them in with special stuff to soak them in and keep them clean. And he was never getting the supplies to keep up with that. He'd get some travel toothpaste, but nothing that he could actually use. So we'd been supplying him with this. I didn't even recognize him when I saw him in person, but here he was now employed with a company, giving back and volunteering. Because we provided those basics, he could focus on those other goals. So it was just really great to see him smiling the whole time with this big grin. And that's something I really hold true, that we don't always know where our clients go, where our recipients go, what they do today. But we know that in that moment, we could have provided them with something tangible and life-changing and impactful. So that was a really nice moment.
Love the stories. Turning to you, Amy, please share with us one of your favorite stories.
Well, this is a very silly story, but we have a wonderful teaching artist named Josh Matthews, who's a professional clown, and he taught clowning and juggling this summer. And he taught one class in an entire banana suit, and it was ridiculous and silly. And he taught the whole class as if he were a Professor Banana, and the students loved it. And a few weeks later, we had a Dress as Your Teacher day at camp. And one of the students came, and she had created this entire banana suit out of paper and clothes with her family. And it was just this really sweet moment where I could really see the connection between her and this teacher. And there were just so many moments like that where a certain teacher would connect with the right student in the right way with the right medium. And it was just really precious. So, and we also had students who, I have a dance, I made up a dance, and they would perform a dance for us. Or one kid said, "I want to sing this Nirvana song." And we went, "Okay." And he sang this incredible Nirvana song. So just knowing that we had made this safe space for students to just show themselves, dress as a banana, sing Nirvana, do a dance, was just really precious.
Love it. So, Kris, favorite story for us?
So we had to suspend our pop-up care villages last year just because we couldn't have like hundreds of people in one setting. And we relaunched them in January of this year. And we've done quite a few in Oakland. And there's a particular park in East Oakland that we have hosted 2 pop-up care villages. And we've probably seen the most families that we've seen ever. And we work really hard to provide the kids coloring books and bubbles. And there was one family that came through with about 4 or 5 kids. And for me, just to see the look on their face when they got the coloring books and started coloring, and they were just so incredibly excited. And one of the children sat down to get a haircut and said, a lot of times we don't even have money for clean water or food. And just to sit here and have this haircut makes me feel really, really good. And so for me, I love the work that we do, but it all goes back to the guests and just feeling that sense of community, and especially for the children to make them feel special.
Thank you. And speaking of books, going to Risa, favorite story for the last 18 months?
When we get donations of books, we buy some books. We have wonderful publishers who donate books to us, like Starbright, and our local Chronicle Books gives us a steep discount. But ordinary people donate books to us, and companies have drives. In fact, Amy's organization has had book drives for the Children's Book Project. And we have very limited staff. And in pre-pandemic, we had a lot of volunteers, about 100 hours a month minimum of volunteers. And it's reduced now for safety, but the volunteers started to come back in February. And every book that comes in, of the 160,000 or so books that are donated to us, every book is touched. It's counted and it's sorted. Our book bank has 80 categories, from different age groups to the all-important category of dinosaurs, which I believe I created, and some other categories. And so everything is sorted into these categories. And the staff, whoever has done the sorting, and the volunteers, they have a really in-depth knowledge of all the books, whether it's in the stock area or the save for a special occasion back closet, or out where the public could select it. And a teacher came in, and our staff helps people. A lot of the volunteers are retired teachers. They're very knowledgeable about reading levels. And the teacher said she had a very traumatized student and could not get the student to speak. And this teacher talked for a bit, and my staff just quietly, Kathleen, the site manager, walked into the back room where we keep special books and handed the teacher a book that had the student's name in the title. And the teacher burst out crying and said, this is going to get him to speak for the first time. And my staff joined her in weeping. We specialize in that. But that's an important story to me, of that individual touch where you're helping people. And so I just want to make sure I encourage the organizations here to, if you're serving under-resourced people, come to us and we will give you wonderful free books that fit the needs of the age group that you're serving, or the children of the adults that you're serving. Please do come to us.
Thank you. And Adriana, do you have a favorite story?
The last 18 months, there's one moment that stands out for me. And in the performing arts, what we do is about being together and performing with an audience and clapping and the whole thing. And that has been taken away in the last 18 months. And we've created virtual performances and video performances, and that is all very creative and wonderful, but it does not have that same excitement that in-person live performance has. And so we were fortunate enough to be able to screen one of our video performances at Fort Mason when they had their big drive-in theater right on the bay. And we did that in May, and we did a couple of them so that all of our families could attend. And so it was so fun for the first time in over a year to be standing in the wind and having all these families drive through safely at a distance, wave from their car, pull in, or if they weren't in a car, there was a safe viewing area, and to watch the students perform. It's pre-recorded, but perform on the big screen, and then have all of the cars honking and shouting with their windows down, and to just have that in-person but distant excitement again was very nice and fun, and made it feel like, okay, there's a future here where we're all going to be together again. It might not look exactly the same, but we can find a way to make it happen.
And staying with you, Adriana, I'm going to turn to our next series of questions. And really, just you've all been at this for a year and a half. What do you feel are some of the big lessons that you and the San Francisco GirlsChorus team have learned? And I think also part of that, or what are some of the processes or resources you wish you would have had to be able to address the pandemic?
Flexibility, that's ultimately the biggest lesson and also tool here. Again, for what we do, it's about in-person. Singing is considered a high-risk activity. So we are always having to evaluate what we're doing, rethink how we're going to do it going forward. And sometimes that changes so quickly. And so everybody on the staff, all of our families, all of our students have just had to learn to be extremely flexible, which I think is a great lesson. And especially in live performance, anything could happen. And so you need to be able to adapt. And there's a greater performative lesson there. But I think that is something that we as a team are going to carry forward. And it's made it so that we've had to communicate in a whole different way. We've had to learn how to navigate these things together with a lot of patience. Tools that I wish we had, I think more resources, more maybe a crystal ball to look into the future to tell us what to do, that would be helpful. But at the end of the day, it's been about having to navigate this the best that we can and just know that there's going to be little blips, there's going to be challenges, but remaining flexible and adaptable is how we've been able to get to where we are.
Thank you. And coming to you, Meghan, what do you feel has been some of the big lessons that you guys have learned over this last year and a half?
Yeah, so many personal lessons, certainly. But I think that we all are really aware of how any person's circumstances can change in a moment. I really think it showed us how much one decision and one element can impact another. When the libraries closed down, people didn't have access to the internet and bathrooms. And when people didn't have access to the internet, they couldn't connect to their case managers and their social workers and service providers. And when they couldn't connect to service providers, they didn't know what other services were open, and on it went, making things really, really challenging. But I think that what I saw very positively was that this pandemic required an emergency response. Everyone in the community had to participate, whether or not it was just wearing your mask, staying home, getting vaccinated, or completely overhauling how we do business or operations, or the government stepping in and saying, well, we're not going to wait for this paperwork and red lines, and we're just going to go and get people to support it. It was really a global lesson that when there's an emergency, we can respond very quickly and in an emergency. And so the lesson that I really, really hope that we take from this is that COVID is not our only emergency right now. It's not our only pandemic right now. And so I hope that we start responding to all of the other systemic issues in our community with the same emergency response, with the same vigor, with the same all-in community effort, because when we do that, we can really make change. And so I would really like to see us address all of these systemic issues with that same vigor and sense of emergency.
And Amy, how about you? What do you feel have been some of the big lessons? Again, you guys have been a live performance, but also you're in person.
Well, I think educationally, we went from being much more product oriented to being process oriented and relationship oriented. My teaching artist and I became extremely close. The relationships deepened, and we are such a powerful force now. And I feel like we took the pressure off children to perform and put the focus and the emphasis on being loving and kind and creative together. We slowed way down, and it became about relationships instead of product. And what I wish we had had, and it speaks to a larger societal ill, is we have children who have terrible internet connection and no devices. And that is a shame. Like, they cannot learn if they can't hear us or they can't speak and be understood. So that was such an eye opener for me, the inequities in technology in our society.
Thank you. Kris, what do you feel has been some of the big lessons learned for LavaMaeX?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's really just being agile and responsive and knowing that you can have a plan for a program, but that can change pretty quickly. So what are you going to do about it? And how are you going to continue to serve that still fits within your mission? And just putting some thoughts together, but then getting out there and doing it and not spending too much time being intentional and thoughtful, but also just trying it out and seeing what works. For us, we really focused a lot on collaborating with the team. I mean, everything was a conversation. What should we do? How should we do it? And it was a lot of brainstorming, a lot of work sessions. So it's fun for me to bring the team together and say, how can we look at these challenges and do something about what this looks like? So really letting the team loose on your mission, and then really focusing on your partners and deeper partnerships. Like I said, the UCSF street nursing team was out with us twice a week for months, and just it really deepened that partnership to say, okay, how we're all in it together. How are we going to address this as a team? And I think it really brought our partners and community members together to serve and make sure that people felt like they were seen and heard and felt that relationship and trust from us, even if we couldn't deliver a shower or it wasn't a pop-up care village.
And Risa, what do you feel has been lessons learned for Children's Book Project?
Both transparency and a little bit of new technology. So we just went all in on transparency with our supporters and the client organizations we serve. We said we need book donations, and we were really transparent about what we needed because it takes a lot of time to go through books. Some of them are not right. We throw a literacy lifeline, but we don't throw a frayed one. And to Meghan's point of people donate things, but they're not quite right, we believe that these kids from disadvantaged communities deserve the best, the finest books, new books, or gently used books that are not torn and not moldy. And so we were transparent with our supporters, and they stepped up and started giving us the kind of books we need. And if you go to childrensbookproject.org, you'll see our wish list on bookshop.org and also our Amazon wish list of the kinds of books we need, particularly in different languages with diverse characters. And people stepped up, and certainly the financial supporters also stepped up. And we began using technology so that we could bring people back in and reopen, but in a safe way with an appointment system. So that was extremely helpful.
Thank you. And so staying with you, Risa, a question for everybody. How can the audience out there support Children's Book Project? You obviously just talked about books, but besides books, what else can they do? Can folks volunteer these days? Can they donate?
Yeah, thank you, George. So we, as I said, are paying rent for the first time. So we have to fundraise in a very different way and in a broader way. So we certainly need financial support. And you'll be surprised of how many companies do matches with their employee donations. So a modest Apple employee donating $10 is matched by the company. And same Microsoft and Google, they all do that. If you're an employee and your organization wants to have a book drive, that's wonderful. And it's a way for the company to get to know who we are and then consider doing matches. Volunteers, yes. Go to our website, childrensbookproject.org, and you can see how you can volunteer. It's a beautiful, big, airy warehouse that we made into a homey book bank and a meeting place for Read Aloud, and it's safe to come and volunteer. So read about it online and give us books, or if you're working with publishers, have publishers give us books and tell the community. We are now in the Bayview at 2166 Paloux, and we are starting to work with organizations we've really wanted to serve in the community we wanted to serve, but we couldn't because we were physically out in the outer sunset. And now we're at the heart. We're working with the Latino Task Force. They've taken over 1,000 free books just this year. So tell your community about us and come and take what we have to offer. We're looking forward to working with a broader community.
Thank you. And Amy, how can folks get engaged in helping your work?
Well, we have lost funding from California Arts Council because they've had to shift their focus to COVID relief. So our arts programs are really in jeopardy this year. We don't have a lot of supplemental grants coming in. So if you go to zspace.org and donate to youth arts, that helps us return to the schools we have had partnerships with for many, many years. We don't want to disappoint them. So thank you.
And Adriana, how can folks support the San Francisco GirlsChorus?
Financial Financial support is always needed. Of course, as everybody here is saying, Amy brings up a good point that the funding landscape is shifting. And so there's new opportunities out there, but there's some refocusing and some redistribution of funds that's really changing the funding landscape. So donations are always welcome. But we also have a season coming up. It will probably be mostly virtual, maybe some in-person performance. We will see. And so I always encourage everybody to check it out, especially in this virtual time. That's been something that's been very exciting, is that we can have audience members from anywhere and all over from the comfort of your own home. So that's a wonderful way to engage with the organization.
And Meghan, how can folks support besides donating hygiene products?
Yeah, certainly. We love to accept unused hygiene products. Monetary donations goes directly to support those unique items, like the gentleman I mentioned who needed special toothpaste, things that we could get to really fit him. But we have great volunteer opportunities, and these can be done at home. We love doing them with families. We've done Girl Scout groups, but also large corporate groups. We always include a presentation. We engage with you. It's really customizable. We make sure that there's learning there, but also you're actually doing something that is hands-on and can help people. We do have some in-person volunteerism for people who are vaccinated. That includes helping us distribute supplies or participating at our public hygiene. But the biggest thing that's so easy, it takes like 2 seconds, you can do it right after this, is share simply the basics with somebody. We're really small. We're a tiny team that's focused on programs. We don't have anyone in marketing. So if you just tell someone about us, like us on social media, share simply the basics. We do have volunteer ambassador roles, which is pretty cool. But even if you don't want to be that involved, hop on Instagram right now and give us a like. You can like our post with George. That really helps us spread the word. And the bigger reach we have, the more people know about us to get support that they need too. So that's the easy one.
Thank you. And Kris, how can folks, LavaMaeX now back in San Francisco, as I recall, right? Providing some public showers. How can folks support LavaMaeX's work, both here in San Francisco, but I know you have projects going in the East Bay and that you're also trying to support your entire X marketplace of learning.
Yes. And to your point, we're running shower service in Los Angeles, Oakland, and San Francisco, and we are running pop-up care villages in the Bay Area. So we do have volunteer opportunities. Please sign up to volunteer alongside us. We love serving alongside our volunteers and having you all get to know our guests just like we do. You can also donate monetarily or lead a fundraiser. But I think one of the most important things is when you're walking and you see somebody that's unhoused, look them in the eye, say hello, acknowledge them. They feel like they're invisible. So I think it's just important that we all see them as a society, as people who don't make this choice, that it's something that happens to them.
Thank you. So before we go to our final question, what are some of the great things that you could see coming out of this pandemic? Does anyone on the panel have a question for another panel member?
I'd like to ask, what book changed your life as a young person?
What's ironic is that I don't remember the children's books that well because I zipped ahead of my age reading level. And so I remember Black Beauty, I love. But I have a copy of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are. And I love both the art and the writing. And it's something I've done in my personal life for family members with kids, is I've written and done the artwork for children's books that I've never attempted to have published. It was just for a particular child. But it's been fun doing that. I attended a street fair with one of our board members, Cassandra Perkins, who's a healthcare worker. And so the people we serve are not just teachers and educators, but it's a broad swath of communities. And so I attended this healthcare and I read this book I had written. I had a copy of it for a friend's child, and I had to read it 5 times because they kept requesting it. So that was a lot of fun. But I do love the children's books with beautiful artwork like Maurice Sendak. Thanks for asking.
I have a question for Kris, and that is, so in California recently, there's been a lot of talk about how even during the pandemic, we've had to conserve water because of the drought. And I'm kind of curious as to know, how has that affected LavaMaeX's operations? Because, operating showers and operating also build sinks that you were mentioning, all that just in general occupies a lot of water, gallons of it, depending on how often or how long someone's shower is. So I'm kind of curious to know how that has affected you guys as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We're in the process of really trying to figure out how to minimize water usage just in terms of like low flow through different shower heads and things like that. We're really looking into also opportunities to recycle water and if we can partner with people to do that, because it's really important right now with the water crisis and the drought that we're seeing. So we're in the process of looking at some of those different solutions. But at this point, honestly, besides those, we haven't really put anything major into effect, but it's something that we're looking at, and especially so we can talk to our service providers and advise them on how to do that as well.
Thank you. And for everybody, that was Eric Estrada, our associate producer, who asked that question. All right. So I'm going to start with you, Adriana. So final question for everyone. What do you think are some of the positive things that could come out of the combination of the COVID-19 pandemic and now the rise of the Delta variant and our pseudo-normalcy opening again?
Well, positive. I think one of the reasons that I love working with artists is that they are so great at coming up with something amidst very complicated constraints. It's almost like a nice impetus for something wonderful to come out. And COVID has kind of been like that. It's a whole different way of working. It's a different set of parameters. And so one of the things that's been really exciting that our artistic director has done is been able to collaborate with artists from all over the world. And there's a lot of kind of logistical reasons why that's been able to happen. But it has also meant that she's been creative about how music is taught, the way in which it's taught, who it can be for, when it can happen. And so I think some of that may have never actually happened if COVID didn't come on the scene. And I think a lot of it is going to continue. Even if we went back to normal tomorrow, there's some really great ways that art is being made and that art is being shared that will continue. And so I see that as a very positive thing.
And Amy, what do you think are some of the positive things that could come out of the crisis?
I think the lack of pretense. There's a way, because we're all on Zoom, that we've kind of had to let go of looking a certain way or being a certain way. We have children calling on us and cats meowing and no makeup on. And I love that. And I think we've also become really honest with each other, and we're asking questions. Like I'm asking my teaching artist, do you have enough money to pay rent? How are you doing financially? Are you okay? There's a way that I feel like it's taken away this pretense and this sort of lack of honesty, and it's allowed us to get closer and to be really human with each other. And I'm going to hold on to that tight.
Thank you. Kris, what do you feel are some of the good things that could come out of this?
I definitely agree with what Amy said too. I mean, I think even looking at the team, right, and how the team works together when our personal and professional lives are more intertwined, but it does bring a lot more understanding and empathy, I think, overall to the situation. I think we've seen just with our service providers and who we're consulting, there's much more of a sense of how are we figuring this out together, because times are changing so much and everybody's learning from each other. So I think it's really opened people's minds to say, I have a question. Have you solved for this? Let's figure this out. And so I see the community really coming together and helping each other to innovate and to connect, and even more so making those relationships and how to serve together.
Thank you. And Risa, what do you feel are some of the good things that have come out of the pandemic?
A wonderful thing has been us getting to know, and our community getting to know us, and us getting to know the community, particularly with the move to the Bayview. Organizations are discovering us, and they're discovering both how welcoming we are. We're discovering that we're trying to give their children and families the finest, best books possible. And we're starting to work with these community organizations more, because we sometimes get books that are not up to our level. And yet we are allergic to recycling books. It seems like a sin to me. And so we have started, there's a nascent program called Second Reading. And there's community organizations we work with that say, it would be great if we had a little book house, and we're calling it a For Keeps book house, in a certain spot. And we will supply those book houses, and we're working with a school woodworking shop to design and build them. And we'll supply them with free books that are slightly less perfect than the ones that we try to give out in the book bank. And that's really integrated us into the community, working together. It's been beautiful. I think they're aware of our mission now, and word is expanding, and that's the loveliest thing. I look for the day when maybe we're not in business anymore, although I think there'll always be a need for children to have books in their home to own. So it's not like we're only giving books to educators to populate their classrooms and their libraries. We're giving to many organizations. So I think we'll be around for a long time, as long as we have supporters.
Thank you. And then finishing up with Meghan, what do you feel are some of the good things that could come out of all of this?
Yeah, I have seen a really new sense of empathy in the community. And I think it comes from a lot of things. But one thing that I found is we all saw how powerful loneliness is when you have to stay home, when you don't have human contact, how detrimental that is for our health and our well-being. And so, I met a gentleman once, I told him my name, I asked him his name, and he was so emotional at that because no one had said his name to him in weeks. And so I think we have an empathy for people who are sitting alone, who are feeling isolated. And I hope that continues, that empathy, that caring for our neighbors. I've also loved to see that we tested new things. We have believed, not the royal we, many of us have believed in housing first for a long time. We gave people hotel rooms. They improved, their health improved, their well-being improved. So I hope that continues. I hope we learn from that lesson that when you give someone those basics like housing and stability, they can improve, they can achieve other goals. And then that really just what I kind of said earlier, finally, our tagline is really understood. Hygiene, health is public health. And just like the pandemic has been a global effort, we need to respond to so many other issues like homelessness, like income inequality, like systemic racism, like all these issues that these great organizations are solving, access to arts, equitable access to arts and education and reading. We also should respond to that as a global community effort. So I just really hope that we take all those lessons learned and continue it with all of these missions and programs.
Thank you. And so that's the conclusion of our live virtual panel discussion. For everybody, thank you so much, Adriana, Amy, Risa, Kris, and Meghan for participating in our piloted show here, if you will. And we'll make sure that everyone out there that's listening, you'll get it in our newsletter, but we'll have all of the social media and the websites so that you can follow these wonderful organizations, donate, get volunteer time in there, and help provide a hand up to our fellow community members. So thank you all for participating today. I really appreciate it. That's it for this 1 hour special episode. You've been listening to the voices of Amy Prosser from Word for Word, Meghan Freebeck from Simply the Basics, Risa Schwartz from the Children's Book Project, Kris Kepler of LavaMaeX, and Adriana Marcial from the San Francisco GirlsChorus. For more information about each of the nonprofit organizations featured on today's 1 hour special virtual live panel discussion, please go to georgecoster.com and click on our COVID-19 special series page to listen to the interviews with Word for Word in Episode 8, Simply the Basics in Episode 16, LavaMaeX in Episode 3, Children's Book Project in Episode 6, and the San Francisco GirlsChorus in Episode 30. We really want to hear from you in our short listener survey, so please go to georgecoster.com and click on the survey button on the upper right-hand side of the homepage and provide us your feedback and insights. Please tune in to KSFP 102.5 FM for next week's show on September 2nd from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m., and we will feature voices from performing arts and social service nonprofit organizations. We're working on our next virtual live panel discussion and 1 hour show for September. Please sign up for our newsletter at george@georgecoster.com so we can keep you in the loop and you can participate in the next virtual live panel show. We hope that you enjoyed the insights, points of view, and personal stories from the voices of changemakers and their nonprofits and small businesses featured in this series. To find out more and get engaged with the nonprofits, small businesses, and staff members featured in the series, please go to my website, georgecoster.com, and click on Voices of the Community to find links to the extended versions of these interviews and to listen to the entire series. After listening to these stories, we hope that you will consider making a donation and volunteering to provide a hand up to your fellow community members. I want to thank my associate producer, Eric Estrada, and Casey Nance at Citron Studios, along with the wonderful crew at the San Francisco Public Press and KSFP. Voices of the Community is a member of Intersection for the Arts, which allows us to offer you a tax deduction for your contributions. Please go to georgecoster.com and click on the donate link to make a donation to help us provide future shows just like this one. While you're on our website, you can enjoy our archived past shows, which feature community voices working on solutions to critical issues facing Northern California communities. And you can sign up for our newsletter to find out more about future shows, as well as shows and events from the organizations that are included in our episodes. Take us along on your next COVID walk by subscribing to Voices of the Community on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Google Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at George Coster, and we'd love to hear from you with feedback and show ideas, so send us an email to george@georgecoster.com. I'm George Coster in San Francisco, and thank you for listening.